Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to the EFL Debate League 2 podcast. We're here to reflect a little bit on the season that's just gone in the fourth tier, but also look forward to the playoff final. So I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Ward from Walsall Fan TV, the Joy and the Pain. Lovely to see you, Simon. How are you feeling after that semi-final victory over Chesterfield that's got you to Wembley?
We had been, as a fan base, I think we're all sort of thinking we got no chance in the playoffs. And everybody was sort of, oh yeah, we'd love Walsall in the playoffs. So they're all sort of cheering when Chesterfield fans were cheering when they'd realised they got Walsall. But the Walsall game at Crewe, it seemed like Walsall sort of switched back on almost.
Yeah.
And it was a very accomplished performance.
It's in one sense it's the perfect time to switch back on, and in another sense it's absolutely far too late.
The perfect time to switch back on.
It's given you a chance, but it's not giving you the massive chance. But I suppose you've got to put that behind yourselves now.
Yeah. The perfect chance to switch back on would have been Harrogate, Accrington, Newport, any of them.
Well, do you know what though? I mean, you only got 2 points from those games. I watched a couple of them. I did think you were a little bit unlucky to only get 2 points, especially with the
the hand of Osh.
Yeah, exactly.
If he'd have just thrown his head at that, I think he was probably a bit nervous about sort of heading the post. Perhaps that's why he'd got his hand up. Perhaps.
But also, even Harrogate and Accrington Stanley, it felt like there were don't get me wrong, there are periods of those games that were horrendous, but there were also long periods where you were right on top of them, whereas the opposition scored completely out of nothing. So to only have 2 points from those three games, there's a little bit of. But what I do like, Simon, and we'll come on to the last three games, since Matt Sadler changed formation, going from giving up on trying to find the right strike partner for Jamil Matt, which has been an absolute nightmare in the second half of the season. He's gone to that 3-4-2-1. It seems to have given you much more stability in midfield, and you've been creating chances in the last three games.
Yeah, it sort of switched. It switched a couple of games earlier, and it hadn't quite clicked. So it took a couple of games to sort of really get into it. But it certainly looks very good now with Jamil Matt up there, with Jamie Jellis and George Hall, both quick and eager attacking midfielders. It certainly sort of gives us an extra dimension. I think neither of them are perhaps the ideal attacking midfielder that you would pick. But I mean, I think they're both adapted to the role really well. And as you say, creating lots of chances. Chesterfield, let's be honest, they're a very good side. But Walsall sort of got back to what they'd been doing pre-January and just stopped them playing.
Yeah,
we just stopped them playing. Sort of the intensity in the midfield was back, and just giving them no time on the ball at all, and restricting them to limited chances.
Talk to me about the role Alfie Chang has played in the last few weeks, Simon, because he seems to have given you, he wasn't really in the best 11 for much of the season, but he seems to have given you that extra layer of creativity in some of his passes, and the vision that he can provide has been quite impressive.
He's a quality player. I think one thing that Alfie Chang has done with the new sort of more box midfield, it's given support to Ryan Stirk. So I think we've seen a much better Ryan Stirk with Alfie Chang alongside him. And I think that is one of the big benefits of Alfie Chang. But Alfie is a real quality. Birmingham know how good he is. When he came in January, he wasn't fit. So it's a bit strange bringing a player on board when they're not fit. But it took time for him to get ready for the first team. And then perhaps they're sort of a bit delicate with him, not throwing him in too much. Everybody watching Walsall would have liked to have seen him have more minutes. His cameo away to Gillingham sort of showed what he'd got about him, and then he didn't feature for the next few games. So that was a little bit frustrating. But yeah, he's got that composure. He's got that composure, and the strike against Chesterfield summed it up really. You got two players running at you on the edge of the box, and they looked really sort of favourites to get to the ball in some respects. And he just kept it hard and low and picked his spot. So excellent.
Absolutely. One thing I would love to ask you about is that right wing back spot, because Connor Barrett has been sort of nailed on for it for much of the season. And maybe there's a degree of burnout because while he was just sumptuous in the first 3 or 4 months of the season, his performances have dipped a little bit and he's not been able to fly to the byline with quite the same regularity. But in the second half of the season and towards the end of the campaign, he's been rotated with Nathan Asimwe. Do you think that has helped a little bit, having that bit of competition in that right wing back spot?
Very much so. Conor Barrett got found out a little bit. So in 2 ways, people sort of understood what he was going to try and do, and they're doubling up on him. So they sort of took him away as a big threat for us. Nathan Asimwe is a very tricky character, and I can't understand why it took so long for Walsall to get him into the team, because obviously he's been training with them since January and just wasn't getting the minutes. And since he's been in, he's comfortable crossing on either side. He's very accomplished, and he's solid at the back as well. So that is a player that sort of really brought us on in the last few weeks of the season. So that was good. To be honest, one player I think you might be coming to him is Liam Gordon. Liam Gordon has looked over the last couple of months just totally shattered and really needed replacing and needed a break. But the 2 games against Chesterfield, he was out of this world.
Right.
It's like he's suddenly got his energy back, and he's been fantastic.
Do you think, Simon, it's having 2 attacking midfielders that has helped Liam Gordon? Because if I look at the first half of the season, let's look at the dynamics of the team. It was Liam Gordon cutting inside a lot because that's part of his game, and Taylor Allen kind of getting forward on the overlap. But whereas in the first half of the season, he had Nathan Lowe dropping in to link the play with those 2 number 8s, and Liam Gordon had lots of options in possession. In the second half of the season, it was Jamil Matt pinned up against the centre halves with Danny Johnson, Ethan Wheatley, Levi Manchi, whoever.
More Albert Adalma and Amanchi.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and all of them were so advanced that that maybe Liam Gordon didn't have those same options. Whereas now, because you've got 2 number 10s, he's got more options in possession that maybe brings a bit more.
I think that's definitely working. I can understand in some ways why Matt Sadler started playing Adalma, because it is a very young squad and it's some experience in there. But he's not cut out to be a centre forward, Adalma. He's much better on the wings and maybe in central midfield almost, or attacking midfield roles. So,
or could he play left wing back?
or left wing back, he's or right wing back even.
Yeah.
So I think I can understand why Matt Sadler put him in as up front, but I mean it clearly didn't work, and he didn't change it quick enough, I don't think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I do like is that he does seem to start one of Matt or Amanchi, but normally in the semi-final, it's both times it's been Jamil Matt who started. But then you've got Levi Amanchi coming off the bench with his pace in behind, and when the game becomes more stretched, that's where Amanchi could be valuable off the bench at Wembley.
Well, I think Jamil Matt probably won't last as many minutes on the big occasion. So I think it'll be down to Amanchi to sort of finish the game off. But if you think that the 2 for Wimbledon, Joe Lewis and Ryan Johnson, they're typical guys they're going to be up against Jamil Matt. But then when Amanchi comes on, I talked about this on my match preview with Reese from Wimbledon. Nobody knows what Amanchi's going to do, not the fans, and I don't think he even knows what he's going to do. So he's a very difficult player to play against.
Yeah.
And last 20 minutes of a game, he is going to be a real horrible player to be against.
Yeah, certainly is.
Particularly with probably Adama coming on at the same time. There's sort of so much creativity and tests for them to face.
And by the way, Uncle Albert still has a bit of pace about him. I mean, I remember the Tranmere game back in January where he absolutely skinned the opposition left back and created things. So he does have that. Although he is a veteran at this stage, he does have that sort of the odd moment, and certainly from the bench, I'm sure he can provide that.
Well, he's very good at the press as well. I'm sure he's only 27, not 37. Because he is everywhere. When he comes on, I say last 25 minutes, he's really intensity. He's really good. He's nipping the ball off centre halves and that sort of thing. So yeah, we've got a lot we can change off the bench. It's a case of staying in the game until that point, perhaps.
Yeah, good to have Harry Williams back.
Harry Williams, I can't understand why he was out the team. I know he had a little knock. But he was out the team for way too long. He is sort of Warsaw's brick wall compared to Joe Lewis being the brick wall for Wimbledon, I think. And both of them have really been very solid this season and contributed to 2 very good defences.
And he's so comfortable on the ball as well, which I think makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Harry Williams. I think he's got a lot of potential. David Agagbu, I saw in the aftermath of the Accrington Stanley game, a lot of frustration sort of boiling over, and I kind of, fans will be entitled to have different perspectives on this, but I actually quite liked that. It showed his sort of passion and care, and that he cared about things, as opposed to kind of walking off indifferent. So it shows that this is somebody who really cares about the football club.
Yeah, definitely. I think David Agagbu is in the Chesterfield game. He had a dodgy start in both games, but you've got to remember he's still a very young player, so there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. But he's come through. He finished both games really well. I say in the first game, he had a couple of dodgy moments, then a dodgy moment right at the start of the second game. But he pulled it together, and it's one of those you have to remember that it's a very young Walsall team.
Yeah,
it's a very young Walsall team. And when Matt Sadler tried to put more experience in, putting Brandon Comley in. That sort of didn't work when he put him.
I think Sturk's a lot better than Comley myself. I like Sturk and Chang at the base of midfield.
Yeah, but I think in recent games, bringing Comley on near the end of a game to help see things out is probably an okay one for fresh legs. And similarly with Charlie Lakin as well, bringing him on, sort of obviously got the goal against Chesterfield, so that was good. Lots of options off the bench for Walsall. Lots of options off the bench, and I think that's where Walsall have got a bit of a strength going into Monday.
Well, let's bring in our co-host then, Ben Jones. Ben, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Just wondering how you see Walsall going into the playoff final, because they've actually won their last 3 games, which is by far the best form they've had for some time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the main thing I was looking at with this game was both with Walsall and Wimbledon, they were coming up against possession sides in the semi-finals, and they both countered that. So now playing somewhat similar styles, Walsall and Wimbledon, are they going to just cancel each other out? So I had a quick look back at the fixtures they had against each other in the season, and I think one was a 1-1 draw and the other one was a 1-0 win. I forget which way that win went, but they were tight games.
Walsall won away 1-0. It was a very tight game.
But there was only 3 goals in those games, not many shots in the games. So I think that's kind of what I'm going to expect out of this final. Is quite a cagey game where it might be a 1-0 win or a 2-1, and I think a moment of individualism, or someone taking a chance here and there, might be the difference. Who can hold their nerve. But it's quite interesting the way that the playoffs kind of went for Walsall, because you had that sort of well talked about run back half of the season, and then you just managed to find a bit of a second win, didn't you? Kind of at Crewe and then into the playoffs, and again looked like you kind of rediscovered what you had for sort of 2/3 of the season. So I think I've got Walsall down as slight favourites for this, but I think it's going to be a really tight, cagey game, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was decided by something like Taylor Allen set piece or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Walsall's goals this year as well. The most goals in the league from set pieces, 25 set piece goals. So there's a pretty strong chance that they'll get one in this game if they're scoring on average one every other game. So I think that's kind of the way I'm seeing this game going.
Yeah, I think the away win for Walsall at Wimbledon, that was a very tight affair with very few chances, just the one goal. The game at Walsall was much more recent, one apiece, but that was during Walsall's really rocky spell. I think Walsall are sort of much more on it now, I think. So I think they're going to be a tougher opposition than Wimbledon had in the recent game. I think Matty Stevens is one of those. He scored a lot of goals this season, but he is going through a rough spell, and he's very much a confidence player. So I think that's pegging him back a little bit from sort of saying that he'll probably score now.
He's not really one that will go and create stuff for himself, I don't think. He's more one that will benefit from service from elsewhere, and in a tight game he might not get that service, so that could play in his confidence there, and could struggle to get in the game. I can see that.
James Tilley and Josh Newville, they've got a special goal in them. But with Walsall, obviously you got Taylor Allen, the specialism, and Albert Adoma can create something, and George Hall, again, there's some real quality there, and obviously Alfie Chang as well.
I like George Hall. I don't think we've mentioned him quite fully before, because I think he's a very strong direct runner, isn't he? And with having one fewer striker, I think his ability to break into the box from that number 10 position, I think, can be, and just drive the team forward generally, I think can be a real strength. Simon, I know you've got to head off because you've got a snooker thing on today. Can you just give us a prediction before you leave us?
I think Ben was spot on, really. I think probably a 1-0 win, nice and tight. If Walsall can get 2 goals, I think that'll be enough to win it.
Absolutely. Well, Simon, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck. Good luck on Monday.
Cheers, matey. Thanks. Good to see you. Cheers.
So Ben, I wanted to touch a bit more on Wimbledon, who we mentioned there. I think that the big strength from them in the last 3 games, 3 straight 1-0 wins, is that defensive resolve. They've conceded the fewest goals in the league across the 46-game campaign. They kept the joint most clean sheets with Colchester. They've got a very good goalkeeper in Owen Goodman. They've got some spirited defenders in Joe Lewis and Sean Hutchinson. They'll be looking to go and get a 4th 1-0 win, won't they?
Yeah, I think both sides will, to be fair, which is why I'm kind of expecting a really tight, cagey game where a counter attack in the down stages of the game, or a set piece could be the difference. I think you'd be looking at Neufeld maybe as the one for Wimbledon towards the end of the game, with his kind of energy and sort of running power, whether something would happen there. And I think kind of be interesting, because I've got that side also as kind of Walsall's sort of strength, the side he's coming up against. So I think that side of the pitch could be really crucial to how the game goes, how he does against that left side of Walsall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as much as I have a lot of respect for Wimbledon in terms of that defensive organisation and the way they defend the box, I know, and Goodman as well. I also feel like they've relied on Josh Nerfville for pace, like who you mentioned, and he's maybe not been quite as influential since he's become a marked man. They relied on Omar Bajil as a target man presence, and he's looked a bit more jaded recently, having played so many games both for club and country. And they've relied on Matty Stevens, like you mentioned, for goals, and he's scored one since mid-February. So from all three angles, they're a little bit more limited. And while they have won their last three games, which you've got to give them their kudos for that, I question whether they're creating chances at a high enough rate for me to be that confident about them going into the final. So that's my reservation with the Dons.
I think that's fair enough. I think I saw this with kind of the Carlisle Stockport game when I went to that one a couple of years ago. That kind of I think nerves can play into these games quite a bit as well. In that game, kind of you saw quite a few individual errors from sort of Fraser Horsfall you wouldn't normally expect, and I wonder, is there someone who's going to struggle from either of these two sides in this game on Monday? You wouldn't really expect it too much from Walsall in particular. I think they're, as you say, their backline's got a little bit more. It's such a tight one that I do think that kind of no-fill battle down against Walsall's left, and who manages Liam Gordon and also Taylor Allen playing sort of the left centre back as well. So it's kind of that combination there. They're kind of two really key players for me, and kind of Walsall sort of build up, and it's quite hard to sort of predict who's going to end up if either side do, controlling the ball. I'd imagine both sides would probably be happier if the other team had the ball so that they could, sort of counter press and, break in transition, which is where they're both strong. So I think certainly sort of first, the opening stages of the game, we'll probably see, the two sides trying to feel each other out and see who wants to blink first. And then, it's going to be interesting from there. I mean, there's out of form players in both teams.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think as opposed to Charlton against Leyton Orient, where in League One, where both sides have been two of the form sides in the second half of the season, it's almost the opposite in League Two. Wimbledon maybe to a lesser extent, but I think they've won 4 in 16, the last 16 in the league. If you take out the playoff semi-final, and Walsall won 3 of their last 21 or 2021, I think it was, in the league. So again, neither side you would say are necessarily hot in form. So a bit unusual, I suppose, for a playoff final.
Yeah, normally we see, and we were talking about this before the playoffs, that normally we see a side that comes late into the playoffs and has a bit of form, and they're the kind of sides that go on to win it. And this year, kind of before the playoffs, we were looking at sort of Chesterfield. They had that strong sort of last 15 games to the season. Walsall, to be fair to them, were quite comfortable in sort of dispatching them. They did all the damage in that first leg, really, and there was a big uphill battle there. So maybe with that off the back, 4 goals over those 2 games, they've got the slight edge here, and a bit more found form. Because I think when you kind of look at the Wimbledon games, they were coming up against another side who were out of form in knots. So, if you were kind of picking one side that was maybe a bit in more form, you would say Walsall, having beaten kind of the informed side of League Two in Chesterfield. So that's kind of an interesting one. I think, as I said earlier, the set piece thing's going to be huge for me. Kind of looking at the goals the sides have scored. I think Walsall have got 25, and Wimbledon, even though not as many, have still scored 15 from set pieces. So there's a lot of set piece goals there, and in these type sort of games that kind of predicting, that could be a big deciding factor there. Maybe as well. I think Walsall tend to be a bit more proficient in sustaining pressure, and once they get into the final third, kind of staying there. And off the back of that, working on the set piece thing a bit more, they're going to have more set pieces, maybe, more chances of getting that goal. So yeah, I think there's a few things for me kind of favouring Walsall at the moment, but I can still see that threat on the counter from Wimbledon if they do get those opportunities.
Yeah, I think the other factor here is that the way Walsall build up, Liam Gordon. So whereas on the right hand side, David Akagbu is playing behind a wing back in either Conor Barrett or Nathan Simway, who likes to attack the flank, so they don't need to get forward as much. Taylor Allen is behind a left wing back in Liam Gordon, who likes to cut inside and basically link up with the midfield and the tens. So that means that Taylor Allen's going to be getting forward a lot. And now I don't know if Josh Murphill's going to be playing on the right or the left. So if I was in Johnny Jackson's shoes, I'd actually play him on the right because of his pace, and I would think that he could get get ahead of Taylor Allen and open things up that way. So that could be which side Josh Murphill plays. I think it could be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I had that down as the space that Wimbledon could potentially exploit, for the reasons you were saying there, that between those two, they kind of drift out of position a bit and can leave spaces on that left flank of Walsall. So I just kind of assumed that that'd be where Neufville would, slip in at kind of the right wing back sort of role and look to exploit that. And maybe, if they can flip the cards a bit there and sustain a bit of pressure, they can sort of pin Gordon and Allen back, and I think that would really limit the Walsall build-up play as well. So yeah, I think that, as I say, that battle, assuming that's how it lines up, is where I would think a deciding part of the game will be played.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of as a matchup, I think that aspect of it could favour Wimbledon. So, but then I think Walsall as a chance creation machine, I think, are possibly have a slight edge on recent form. So, with that in mind, Ben, you're saying it's going to be a low-scoring game, and you would make Walsall slight favourites. So, you thinking a 1-0 win for the Saddlers?
Yeah, I'm thinking 1-0 Saddlers at the minute. I mean, we could end up being completely wrong. It could end up being, all guns blazing kind of game where, both teams come out the blocks, there's early goals apiece, and the game doesn't really ever stop. You don't really quite know in the playoffs, do you? With the way that, the nervous energy kind of plays on the players. But yeah, I think, probably be looking at a 1-0 Walsall win as sort of educated guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'll go for a 2-1 for the Saddlers. So there you go. That's my predictions for the game. Ben, just before we finish off, I'd like to have a bit of a recap on the League season.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got to say massive congratulations just to round things off to Doncaster Rovers, Port Vale and Bradford City on their achievements, starting with Doncaster, who, I think Grant McCann said he wanted to win the title 12 months ago, and that's exactly what he's achieved. Yeah,
absolutely. I think pre-season, pretty much everyone was saying MK Dons were going to be the runaway league winners this year. I mean, you looked at predictions pretty much anywhere, and it was MK Dons first, MK Dons first. And, a lot of us kind of got that wrong. But I think just behind that, Doncaster weren't too far behind in most people's kind of predictions. So, people are kind of expecting them to build on what they did last year, and fair play to them for actually doing it. I think they were, for me, the most consistent side in League Two this year. I don't really recall them ever going on, like a crazy 10-game run or anything. It was always, just that steady return of points, and in the end, with other sides sort of like Walsall kind of slipping up here and there, and Bradford kind of getting into the front and then not maintaining it kind of that consistency saw them over the line. But I don't think Port Vale were too far behind in those stakes. They were always sort of top 5 or 6 all season, I think, as well. I think Darren Moore came in for a little bit of criticism at times, certainly earlier on in the season when they weren't looking too great going forward. But I think sort of Talage playing towards the end of the season and his form and the 10 or 12 goals that he scored made a massive difference for them. So fair play to them, and also fair play to Bradford for finally getting over the line, and maybe we'll see them build on that now with that amazing fan base they have for the these lower league levels.
And that's the thing, because they've got such a brilliant fan base that just so loyal and go, every season, in 5 figures. It means that, from a boardroom perspective, you don't have to be amazing to get it right at Bradford. You've
Yeah.
just got to not screw up. And I think because the fan base, means that it can be a self-funded club almost. And
Yeah, well, I think with the the revenue they've got there, they're always going to have a top budget in League Two.
Yeah.
Last season, not the one gone, the one just before that, when we had Wrexham and Stockport, it was a bit harder for them because you had those kind of sides with, very big budgets and kind of, to an extent, sort of boxed off top 3 spots before we even got going. And then Mansfield as well, they finally cracked League Two, but as you say, kind of they've had that consistency, and I think they'll, with the extra money you get in League One, they're going to have a competitive budget in there, and they'll probably look to consolidate there. So good for them. But I think I have to kind of mention at the other end of the table there a bit of sort of sadness for Morecambe with the off the pitch issues they've got there, and trying to even convince their owner to sell. And hopefully they can do that and then start the rebuild process in the National League. It's a very tough league to get out of. So I think the main thing for them for now is to just stabilise, and hopefully, as I say, they can get that ownership situation sorted. And
I hate that what's happened at Morecambe is that every year there's uncertainty as to, are they going to have a running budget? Never mind what's the playing budget going to be. Are they going to have a running budget? And that only gets seems to get revealed at around June or whatever, and it's just completely unsustainable. So I really would love to. There's some amazing people at that football club, and I really hope that they have the investment from the top and the security from the top that allows them to rebuild, because I do see a lot of potential there. So hopefully that change happens.
And I think, to be fair to Derek Adams, you have to really point out as well that the sort of squad. Sorry, my dog. She always does this when I'm on the podcast.
She wants
to contribute. The kind of squad he was kind of given or ended up with, whatever you want to say, it's pretty much a mid-table National League squad. That he's managed to find a tune out of to make it even somewhat competitive in League Two, and they had so many marginal games that they lost 1-0 or drew 1-1, and I think a lot of credit has to go to him for doing his best there, and good luck to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose Carlisle United has been such a disappointing season for them, and it's sort of very surprising that they achieved promotion under the previous ownership regime that was getting a lot of things wrong, and under the new ownership regime that in some ways is getting a lot of things right in terms of off the field, outside the footballing side. They've probably made mistakes, from the footballing point of view, but there's much better optimism in terms of the long-term future for Carlisle. But they've actually had back-to-back relegations, so but I do think that in the National League they will have one of the biggest budgets in the league by a distance from other than one or two other teams. So I would expect them to be right up there, with Mark Hughes confirmed to be staying as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably a nice thing because they seem to sort of appreciated the run-in that Mark Hughes has had with them there, and he actually, I think, had a reasonable points return. I don't quite know off the top of my head, but I did look at it the other day and it was quite decent. I think kind of going into that league, you've got sort of York and Forest Green sort of as semi-established, especially York with the squad they built up, and there was a bit of a weird rumor that they were getting rid of their manager, but that seems to have passed now. So I think not
enough for you.
No. I think alongside those two clubs, you'd imagine that Carlisle will have the biggest budget, and you'd be amongst those three for that one automatic spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a few other teams that probably haven't delivered on expectation, one of them being, of course, Tranmere Rovers. Are you hopeful that you can sort of climb the table again under Andy Crosby next season?
I think we'll climb it. Whether we climb it as much as we want to climb it will depend on, I think, off the pitch. I mean, there's a lot of talk that the budgets, the fact of who's actually going to be in the division is going to be one of the top budgets anyway.
Yeah.
Because your bigger budget clubs have all left the division the last couple of seasons. Whether it's Forest Green and Carlisle through the bottom, or Wrexham, Stockport, Mansfield, Bradford, Port Vale, Doncaster going up kind of thing. So I think as a consequence, we're going to have a good, healthy budget either way. We've so far kept some of the players we wanted to keep in: Leo Connor, Amari Patrick, and Luke McGee. I think the other one would be Regan Hendry. If we can keep him, that'd be massive. But
yeah,
I think beyond that, it's a massive rebuild. So it's hard to know with us.
Of course, plenty to be revealed with summer transfers, and then I guess MK Dons and Gillingham are the ones that have disappointed. Yep. And I think much of next season is going to be dictated by whether they can, under what would have been regarded as good League One managers in Paul Warne and Gareth Ainsworth, it's going to be much of the league is going to be determined by whether those two can convert resources into results.
Yeah, I think the MK Dons one's really interesting because I wouldn't have associated Warne with MK necessarily. It's another stylistic change. For me, I think the issue they had with their squad this year was there was a lot of good technical players there, but they lacked the kind of physicality that you need in League Two. And maybe in all those duels and 50-50s and kind of winning second balls and all those kind of intangibles that they, just weren't quite there. So maybe that's where they've gone with Warne, is to try and improve on all those side of things. And I think the problem that'll present for them is they're going to need another big squad rebuild, having essentially just had 2 squad rebuilds in one season. They had one in the summer when they brought in 18 players or whatever it was, and then they brought in another at least half dozen.
I can't imagine there's going to be many that are under contract there. So again, they're gonna need to do, and I think Port Vale possibly did this quite well. Is basically be willing to A, pay people off, and B, pay to have a bigger squad than is normal in order for Paul Warne to bring in his own players, because otherwise he's going to have to work with this season's players, and this season's players have struggled with a style that suits them, let alone with a style that might not suit them. So
I think the problem as well they'll face, and it's a similar problem for Chesterfield. In League Two, you're only allowed to have a 22-man squad registered, and I noticed that Chesterfield have 20 players on their retain list. Right. So, you're looking
they're not going to sign 2 players, are they? So
no. So you're then looking at, so who are we going to upset from our existing players that maybe thought they were, they were settled and, they got their accommodation sorted, the family settled, whatever it may be. And then at the end of July, you go, well, hang on, we're going to pay half your wages and we're going to send you off to, I don't know, Newport or whatever. And you've got to up sticks and move. And so you've got that whole squad management situation going on there.
Sure. A lot of spinning plates, isn't there, with their personal situations, and because some of them will turn around and say, you know what, I don't want to move to Newport. I want to stay here and give me a local loan move or whatever. There's so many...
exactly. And then I think the other one you mentioned there, Gillingham, I think Ainsworth's maybe a closer fit to them than Warne is at MK, because you kind of look at Gillingham over the last couple of seasons, and they've been a very, I don't know, strong defensively is the right word, because they don't set up to attack, so the consequence of that is they don't score or concede too many, but certainly they've kept a lot of clean sheets, and that's probably a foundation that's better for him to work from than maybe some other clubs. So he had a reasonable return at the end of the season. I think that went a bit unnoticed.
Yeah, they didn't lose many, did they?
No, I think they drew quite a lot of games, but if you look at his actual points per game, I'm pretty sure it was in the top 7 in the division since kind of he came in. Now, the thing at the end of the season is you get sort of sides on the beach and whatnot, that whole pretty much middle 10 teams in the
I'm
division.
Also the only apprehension I have about Gillingham, and we'll find out over the summer a little bit, is Gareth Ainsworth's kind of been he's very people oriented, so of course he's going to back his own players. But I think he's been very much won over by the 12-game stint that he's had with
Yeah,
the existing personnel. But you know how you don't fart on a first date.
Yeah.
You're going to give the new manager a sort of an impression of a positive impression of what you're about.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I don't know if we've reached the point where the players will sort of regress to the standards that they might have been lower earlier in the season. So that's just one thing that I'm slightly wary of.
Yeah, I think sort of at Wycombe, his sort of MO was having a really strong group, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and yeah, and having that sort of camaraderie in the squad. And I think that'll be the good thing with it. He has managed to already be sort of on board before the end of the season. He's got a longer period to try and implement that. Because I think, like some other sides, they have quite a lot of under contract players. So, and even some of the ones that weren't under contract, I believe they've kind of retained as well. So he's got a longer period to work with that. Kind of the thing in the back of my mind is he's just come off a kind of a stint where he had a difficult circumstance, and then the one before that, he allegedly lost the dressing room where players didn't quite like his methods. And
I mean, QPR was a different level, though.
Yeah,
I think at Championship level, it's a slightly different kettle of fish, isn't it?
It is tactically, but I think in terms of the team building, it's still the same principles.
Yeah. I think that, but I agree with you. But I also think Championship footballers are a bit more indignant, and they're less likely to be won over by the slightly left field culture building techniques because they want something different. Whereas I think lower level players are a bit more open-minded to that kind of thing. And I think when Gareth Ainsworth lands on a group of players who go all in with him, I think he can make it work. But if he lands with the wrong group of players, then
absolutely.
They're obviously going to...
I think we've seen sort of with ourselves and Swindon that those types of managers can kind of, Adkins and Holloway, they get, good short to mid-term results depending on how you view those terms. So with us, Adkins had a good 2/3 of the season last year, and then obviously did abysmally this year. Similarly, Holloway's had a good half a season, however many games it was with Swindon, and kind of my expectation there is that he'll go the same way Adkins did with us, and that message will start falling on deaf ears. And I wonder if that's the kind of pattern that would maybe follow Gillingham as well, if they don't get, especially if they don't get the squad building quite right, that the message will come through to the players. But as soon as you have a sticky period of 4 or 5 games where you can't get results, is that when the players stop listening? And
interesting.
I think with that type of manager, that's always the risk you have, somewhat regardless of the level. But stylistically, I do think he's a reasonable fit for Gillingham.
I think that's where to some I mean, I feel like Ainsworth is a little bit more charismatic than I feel he's got a bit more about him. But also I think it's so much about recruiting, because I think with Ainsworth you've got to recruit characters that are going to go all in with him, so if you get the recruitment right, you can have an enormous amount of success, way beyond what you'd expect. But if you get it wrong, that's where you can encounter some problems. So I think it all depends on the characters that he's working with, really.
Yeah, and then I guess beyond them, we're looking at Notts County, who are going to have another change. Stuart Maynard being relieved. They kind of, for I don't know, maybe the first half of the season looked like they had a different bit about them. They were certainly more defensively solid this year than they were sort of last year. This season as opposed to the previous season. But they still lacked that physicality and competitiveness, and in all those duels that we're talking about with MK Dons there. And I think towards the end of the season, beyond that, Maynard became a bit, I don't know, afraid of failure maybe, and you could see the kind of tension in the way he was coaching. And there's that sort of moment at Bradford that's become a little infamous, where he's gone and shushed the home fans, and I think that was him kind of showing a bit of nervous energy. And with the pressure that he knew he was under, because I'm pretty sure even at that stage he would have been told, or at least subconsciously aware, that if he didn't get promotion, he was in trouble. And I think that was maybe what contributed to their sort of drop in form in the last third of the season.
I'd also argue that not having a proper coaching team around him, I think, makes a difference, which he did in the first half of the season. So I would put that in the pot as well. I think
having heard that the other day, it kind of made me wonder whether the ownership had already made their mind up that they didn't want to keep him, and they were not sorting that coaching situation out because they wanted to allow a new manager to bring their own team in.
Right.
So, whether it's going back to Luke Williams or bringing someone completely new in, they might have, decided, look, this isn't what we want, and we're going to allow a new guy to bring their own people in rather than bring someone in now that maybe isn't a good fit for that manager that we want to bring in. But I think that it's kind of slightly the point I was making, that they might have undermined the manager and contributed to their end of season drop off with that.
Yeah, it's a what's the expression? I've got it on the tip of my tongue. What's the word? What, when you think something's going to happen and it kind of contributes to it?
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy, where you kind of undermining the manager a little bit and it actually contributes to. I could see that possibly. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know quite. But then, I certainly think that it's Notts County have moved forward a lot defensively. They're still statistically one of the most creative sides in the league. I don't think they've always converted their chances. I do definitely think that there's some work to be done as well. But yeah, I think I'd be curious to see who Notts County appoint. That's going to be.
I think again that's another big kind of one with the recruitment. They don't need a huge amount of players bringing in. They just need the right players. They improved things significantly with the goalkeeper, with Bass. He's one of the top keepers in the league, and then Badeau as well. He's a great addition for them. I said that to you when we played the away game at their place, that we actually had a really good game under Adkins there, and between those two, Bass and Badeau, that was kind of the difference between us embarrassing them as like an out of form side that day. And I think he's still good on the ball, but also adds that extra know-how that they didn't really have at the back. So I think they need someone like that in the centre of midfield.
To complement.
Yeah, another similar kind of addition to Badeau, where they're still good on the ball, but they had that bit of steel and determination, and maybe that's what they kind of lost when Bostock went. Although he didn't really have his legs anymore. I wonder if he was kind of offering that for them to an extent.
Interesting. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Ben, it's been such a pleasure to have you on as my co-host for this season. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks to Simon Ward as well from Walsall Fan TV for joining us earlier. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get hold of a Wimbledon fan at late notice, but hope you've enjoyed the podcast this season. We've certainly enjoyed recording them. Get subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube. Plenty of content coming up over the summer in terms of the summer deep dives. And we'll see you again for another EFL Debate very soon.